Sometimes 9 seconds, sometimes 8, sometimes 10. But as we continue to decorate and build, we can exceed 10 seconds per second, which would mean if we're going 10 times as fast, instead of taking 400 days, it would only take 32. Today is another reading day. Being a lore play, I did some digging around the internet, seeing what other things people have found, what people think, what things people talk about, and I came across an interesting discussion on the Steam forum for The Longing. I guess it's like numerology. Don't know how to pronounce this word very well, but I'm going to give it a try. It's called gematria. It's like numerology, but instead of a single letter, like A being 1, B being 2, and then when you reach I, 9, then when you go to J, it will become 1 again. These numbers, or the letters, represent a very different number sequence. So T, for example, would be 120. This is Gematrix. There's a website, gematrix.org, and you can get a gematria of a word. So somebody did this on the word The Longing. T being 120, H being 48, so forth and so on. And The Longing reaches a sum of 666. For some people, that's a significant number. It's clever, it's interesting. And the developer wrote back and said, it's awesome, but the edginess is completely coincidental. But thank you for the find. I'm looking for, there we are. Okay, I thought I pushed the A button. Here we go. Let's take off idle reading. And, right, our shade, he was left to read his own book. We left him to read Secret Garden. And he made a comment at the end of this book. Wonder if there is a secret place in these caves. Better watch the sound of my steps. Curious. The only time we really noticed so far our steps changing was when we were walking in the halls of eternity, and we suddenly walked on some carpet, and it gave a distinct sound to us. There wasn't any secret in the halls of eternity, so perhaps this is useful later. But, oh right, before I begin, we wanted to celebrate with all of the books that we've gathered and collected, and having reached the library. So we're going to start a fire, and you'll be able to see the significance it has on our time, and then quite immediately we're going to come over and start reading a book. So we can do a regular fire, a blue fire, and a smelly fire. I know what the smelly fire is for, and we'll be lighting one of those within the next week, I would imagine. The blue fire, something not accessible to us yet. And the regular fire, yeah, we're going to lose a couple of coal from 100, but that's fine. We'll find 2 more pieces. the crystals won't burn. Perfectly fine. But you can see the impact it has on our timer. The fire doesn't last long on its own. However, I believe when you're reading a book, it remains for some time. Chapter 16. Neighbor Love. Ye crowd abound around your neighbor, and have fine words for it. But I say unto you, your neighbor love is your bad love of yourselves. Ye flee unto your neighbor from yourselves, and would fain make a virtue thereof, but I fathom your unselfishness. The thou is older than the I. The thou hath been consecrated, but not yet the I. So man presseth nigh unto his neighbor. Do I advise you to neighbor love? Rather, do I advise you to neighbor flight, and to furthest love? Higher than love to your neighbor is love to the furthest and future ones. Higher still than love to man is love to things and phantoms. The phantom that runneth on before thee, my brother, is fairer than thou. Why dost thou not give unto it thy flesh and thy bones? But thou fearest, and runnest unto thy neighbor. Ye cannot endure it with yourselves, and do not love yourselves sufficiently, though you seek to mislead your neighbor into love, and would fain gild yourselves with his error. Would that ye could not endure it with any kind of near ones, or their neighbors. Then would ye have to create your friend and his overflowing heart out of yourselves. Ye call in a witness when ye want to speak well of yourselves, and when ye have misled him to think well of you, ye also think well of yourselves. Not only doth he lie, who speaketh contrary to his knowledge, but more so he who speaketh contrary to his ignorance. And thus speak ye of yourselves in your intercourse, and beguile your neighbor with yourselves. Thus saith the fool, association with men spoileth the character, especially when one hath none. The one goeth to his neighbor because he seeketh himself, and the other because he would fain lose himself. Your bad love to yourselves maketh solitude a prison to you. The furthest ones are they who pay for your love to the near ones. And when there are but 5 of you together, 6 must always die. I love not your festivals either. Too many actors found I there, and even the spectators often behaved like actors. Not the neighbor do I teach you, but the friend. Let the friend be the festival of the earth to you, and a forestate of the Superman. I teach you the friend and his overflowing heart, but one must know how to be a sponge if one would be loved by overflowing hearts. I teach you the friend in whom the world standeth complete, a capsule of the good, the creating friend, who hath always a complete world to bestow. And as the world unrolled itself for him, so rolleth it together again for him in rings, as the growth of good through evil, as the growth of purpose out of chance. Let the future and the furthest be the motive of thy today. In thy friend thou shalt love the Superman as thy motive. My brethren, I advise you not to neighbor love. I advise you to furthest love. Thus spake Zarathustra. I get what he means, how people will go and speak to someone nearby, a neighbor, a friend, someone they'll talk to regularly and say, how did your day go? And talk about themselves and big themselves up, make light of their own errors. And in some way, they're not being truthful to themselves, and they're becoming like an actor over the truth of the matter. And he didn't like festivals because going to festivals, he found the people in the audience to be fake. They're wearing masks in their day-to-day lives. They're not being true to who themselves are. But he's saying, if you're willing to care for your neighbor in this way, why not care of something that is of your own flesh and blood, like perhaps your own children? Could your children perhaps be that of the Superman? Because that's the potential we should be striving for. That should be what people should be caring about, is the fact that the Superman is close to ourselves, and they're not going to be this fake person who is not true to themselves. So why not think for that? Why not be for that? Why not act for that? And that your day-to-day is filled with, oh, this could be the potential that can exist. And instead of idling your days through this conversation, how did your day go? Oh, it was great, even if it was horrible. And as a mask, why not be real? And that real thing being the potential of this Superman. Grab a drink. Don't leave my drinks by a computer or anything that can be utterly destroyed by fluids. The way of the creating one. That's chapter 17. Wouldst thou go into isolation, my brother? Wouldst thou seek the way into thyself? Tarry yet a little and hearken unto me. Ye, or he, who seeketh may easily get lost himself. All isolation is wrong, so say the herd, and long didst thou belong to the herd. The voice of the herd will still echo in thee, and when thou sayest, I have no longer a conscience in common with you, then will it be a pliant and a pain. Lo, that pain itself did the same conscience produced, and the last gleam of that conscience still gloweth on thine affliction. But thou wouldst go the way of thine affliction, which is the way unto thyself, then show me thine authority and thy strength to do so. Art thou a new strength and a new authority, a first motion, a self-rolling wheel? Canst thou also compel stars to revolve around thee? Alas, there is so much lusting for loftiness. There are so many convulsions of the ambitions. Show me that thou art not a lusting and ambitious one. Alas, there are so many great thoughts that do nothing more than the bellows. They inflate and make emptier than ever. Free dost thou call thyself? Thy ruling thought would I hear of, and not that thou hast escaped from a yoke. Art thou one entitled to escape from a yoke? Many a one hath cast away his final worth when he hath cast away his servitude. Free from what? What doth that matter to Zarathustra? Clearly, however, shall thine eye show unto me, free for what? Canst thou give unto thyself thy bad and thy good, and set up thy will as a law over thee? Canst thou be judge for thyself and avenger of thy law? Terrible is aloneness with the judge and avenger of one's own law. Thus is a star projected into desert space, and unto the icy breath of aloneness. Today sufferest thou still from the multitude, thou individual, today hast thou still thy courage unabated, and thy hopes. But one day will the solitude weary thee, one day will thy pride yield, and thy courage quail. Thou wilt one day cry, I am alone. One day wilt thou see no longer thy loftiness, and see too closely thy loneliness. Thy sublimity itself will frighten thee as a phantom. Thou wilt one day cry, all is false. There are feelings which seek to slay the lonesome one. If they do not succeed, then must they themselves die. But art thou capable of it, to be a murderer? Hast thou ever known, my brother, the word disdain, and the anguish of thy justice in being just to those that disdain thee? Thou forcest many to think differently about thee, that charge they heavily unto thy account. Thou camest nigh unto them, and yet wentest past, for that they never forgive thee. Thou goest beyond them, but the higher thou risest, the smaller doth the eye of envy see thee. Most of all, however, is the flying one hated. How could ye be just unto me? Must thou say, I choose your injustice as my allotted portion? Injustice and filth cast they at the lonesome one. But, my brother, if thou wouldst be a star, thou must shine for them none the less on that account, and to be on thy guard against the good and just. They would fain crucify those who devise their own virtue. They hate the lonesome ones. Be on thy guard also against holy simplicity. All is unholy to it that is not simple. Fain, likewise, would it play with the fire of the faggot and the stake. And be on thy guard also against the assaults of thy love. Too readily doth the recluse reach his hand to any one who meeteth him. To many a one mayest thou not give thy hand, but only thy paw, and I wish thy paw also to have claws. But the worst enemy thou canst meet wilt thou thyself always be. Thou waylayest thyself in caverns and forests. Thou lonesome one, thou goest the way to thyself, and past thyself, and thy seven devils leadeth thy way. A heretic wilt thou be to thyself, and a wizard, and a soothsayer, and a fool, and a doubter, and a reprobate, and a villain. Ready must thou be to burn thyself in thine own flame. How couldst thou become new if thou have not first become ashes? Thou lonesome one, thou goest the way of the creating one. A god will thou create for thyself out of thy seven devils. Thou lonesome one, thou goest the way of the loving one. Thou lovest thyself, and on that account despisest thou self, and only the loving ones despise. To create desireth the loving one, because he despiseth. What knoweth he of love, who hath not been obliged to despise what he loved, to despise just what he loved? With thy love, go into thine isolation, my brother, and with thy creating, and late only will justice limp after thee. With my tears, go into thine isolation, my brother. I love him who seeketh to create beyond himself, and thus succumbeth. Thus spake Zarathustra. So it's kind of the... I've done this before with friends. I've done this before with groups of people. It's funny because this chapter started off saying, avoid the groups of people, avoid the herd, to find your own way in some way. But camping is a common thing that I've seen this happen. It's kind of a therapeutic thing where you would write on a piece of paper something about yourself that you don't like, that you don't want to carry anymore, that you just want to be done with. You would write it, maybe you share it to the group, but then you cast it into the fire and you let it burn away. Now that you've shared it, you can let go of it. You don't have to let it burden you anymore. And, through the ashes, you've made something new for yourself. Well, you don't really make anything new. You've just gotten rid of something. And kind of what he's saying here is to be willing to burn yourself, not physically, but to go through this process of doing that with everything, even perhaps the parts you enjoy about yourself, but to despise those things, to understand why you despise those things about yourself. And that if you want something to be new, you would have to let go of all of these things that you, I guess, have molded up around yourself and say, oh, I am this, I am that. But to look at it with this sort of blunt honesty and begin to despise it. But that's something that I guess comes out of this isolation, this loneliness, and that your worst enemy is going to be yourself. And being your own enemy and hating those things about yourself, to burn those. And from that process to create something new. And that something new, he says here, is the creating one. And that a god wilt thou create for thyself out of thy seven devils. I'm sure the seven devils have some significance of understanding later. I don't think we've read that previously, of what the seven devils represent. It could just be some sort of weird idiom that no longer exists. But I guess it's just kind of like a process of when you're alone, these things you recognize about yourself and perhaps despise, and they call them devils in a way. By overcoming them, you can create, I guess you can say, like a perfection. I don't know if that's what he means by a god, because I don't think he means it as like an actual deity, but he was mentioning deities here about stars going about you and stuff like that. Well, I don't understand all of it, but I get the gist of most of it. And another break. Yes, I can interpret God to be instead as Superman, something greater than yourself. You're not just creating another version of yourself, but perhaps something greater than yourselves. And that would naturally, people would refer to that as a god. That's the next stage, that's the next evolution. And isn't that what Zarathustra is trying to get people to want, that Superman to exist? And so to do that process for yourself, to become this better than the current self. Chapter 18. O then, young woman, why stealest thou along so furtively in the twilight, Zarathustra? And what hidest thou so carefully under thy mantle? Is it a treasure that hath been given thee, or a child that hath been born thee? Or goest thou thyself on a thief's errand, thou friend of the evil? Verily, my brother, said Zarathustra, it is a treasure that hath been given me. It is a little truth which I carry, but it is naughty like a young child, and if I hold not its mouth, it screameth too loudly. As I went on my way alone today, the hour when the sun declineth, there met me an old woman, and she spake thus unto my soul. Much hath Zarathustra spoken also to us women, but never spake he unto us concerning woman. And I answered her, concerning woman, one should only talk unto men. Talk also unto me of woman, said she. I am old enough to forget it presently. And I obliged the old woman, spake thus unto her. Everything in woman is a riddle, and everything in a woman hath one solution. It is called pregnancy. Man is for woman a means. The purpose is always the child. But what is woman for man? Two different things wanteth the true man, danger and diversion. Therefore he wanteth he woman as the most dangerous plaything. Man shall be trained for war, and woman for the recreation of the warrior. All else is folly. Two sweet fruits, these the warrior liketh not. Therefore liketh he woman. Bitter is even the sweetest woman. Better that man doth woman understand children, but man is more childish than woman. In the true man there is a child hidden, it wanteth to play. Up then, ye woman, and discover the child in man. A plaything let woman be, pure and fine, like the precious stone, illuminated with the virtues of a world not yet come. Let the beam of a star shine in your love. Let your hope say, may I bear the Superman. In your love let there be valor. With your love shall ye assail him who inspireth you with fear. In your love be your honor. Little doth woman understand otherwise about honor, but let this be your honor, always to love more than ye are loved, and never be the second. Let man fear woman when she loveth. Then maketh she every sacrifice, and everything else she regardeth as worthless. Let man fear woman when she hateth, for man in his innermost soul is merely evil. Woman, however, is mean. Whom hateth woman most? Thus spake the iron to the lodestone. I hate thee most, because thou attractest, but art too weak to draw unto thee. The happiness of man is, I will. The happiness of woman is, he will. Lo, now hath the world become perfect. Thus thinketh every woman when she obeyeth with all her love. Obey must the woman, and find a depth for her surface. Surface is woman's soul, a mobile, stormy film on shallow water. Man's soul, however, is deep. Its current gusheth in subterranean caverns. Woman surmiseth its force, but comprehendeth it not. Then answered me the old woman, many fine things hath Zarathustra said, especially for those who were young enough for them. Strange, Zarathustra knoweth little about women, and yet he is right about them. Doth this happen because with women nothing is impossible? And now, accept a little truth by way of thanks. I am old enough for it. Swaddle it up and hold its mouth, otherwise it will scream too loudly, the little truth. Give me, woman, thy little truth, said I, and thus spake the old woman. Thou goest to women. Do not forget thy whip. Thus spake Zarathustra. So I don't think they're talking about like BDSM whip. I think they mean it symbolically as like to inspire, to drive on, to there's like a sense of purpose coming about from that. I like the way that chapter was told, because somebody was speaking to Zarathustra, saying, "Where do you go in the night?" And he answered, "Well, I have a little truth, and I must hold its mouth, otherwise it will scream too loudly." And in his answer, he described this old woman who taught him those words. And just as the woman was expressing what it meant, so was Mr. Zarathustra was expressing it to this other person who was asking about it. And by only saying it once, do we have the two perspectives that it was being told in, from the woman to Zarathustra and Zarathustra to this other individual, where he's sharing that little truth. I enjoyed how that was written. Sorry, it's a small weird thing, but it's just like two layers to a sandwich. But what's the meat of that sandwich? Here it is, at the very end. I liked it because it's like playing a video game. And say you have a party of characters and they're about to reach a boss, but they don't reach a boss. Then you switch to another party of characters, and they're also about to reach the boss. And there you find the first party as well. And together you both have the big reveal of the boss. It's like that moment that you were just robbed of, it's now meaningful. But it would be a cheated experience for that first party. And when you see, now you're starting as a new party of characters, and you're going to begin your quest. It's just like, I just wanted the reveal. It didn't give you that negative part of a loop. It's not like a build-up, but a false ending and a second build-up. The first one, this was all as an answer to the first one. And together, with them combined, it's like, oh, that answered both the questions. Clever, brilliant. I enjoyed that. Well done. Bravo. Hear, hear. Encore, all that. So, right. Regardless of that, though, the content of what was being said is that Zarathustra is saying that let's be real about it. What women want and what they desire is for having children. This whole thing about like choosing which person they like most and stuff, it all comes down to having a child. What will make them happy? Having a child, and that's just his simple truth of it. It just boils down to a simple point. Granted, in some ways, I disagree because, well, when you boil things down too much, you kind of miss the meaning of all the nuances there. But at the same time, I'm feeling like these books are meant to be like how to live good lives, how to be better people and stuff like that. And in some way, well, you have to address everyone, right? You can't just address men. You can't just address women. You have to address everyone together. And since that is a thing where people are going in a relationship are going to be interested in having children and such, then why not address that? So I guess that's what this chapter is meant to do and to address. Right, but the answer of it, So as Zarathustra is sneaking off to go to women, do not forget thy whip. And to me, that's just saying, well, what are you intending to do with it? What are you driving it towards? Because if you're just doing that to just idle your time, but yet you're not planning on making a child for this woman, then perhaps that is what's being said. But that men are also like boys, little kids who are just troublemakers. Chapter 19, The Bite of the Adder. One day had Zarathustra fallen asleep under a fig tree, owing to the heat, with his arms over his face, and there came an adder and bit him in the neck, so that Zarathustra screamed with pain. When he had taken his arm from his face, he looked at the serpent, and then did it recognize the eyes of Zarathustra, wriggled awkwardly, and tried to get away. Not at all, said Zarathustra. As yet hast thou not received my thanks. Thou hast awakened me in time. My journey is yet long. Thy journey is short, said the adder sadly. My poison is fatal. Zarathustra smiled. When did ever a dragon die of a serpent's poison, said he. But take thy poison back. Thou art not rich enough to present it to me. Then fell the adder again on his neck, and licked his wound. When Zarathustra once told this to his disciples, they asked him, And what, O Zarathustra, is the moral of thy story? And Zarathustra answered them thus, The destroyer of morality, the good and just call me. My story is immoral. When, however, ye have an enemy, then return him not good for evil, for that would abash him, but prove that he hath done something good to you. And rather be angry than abash anyone. And when ye are cursed, it pleaseth me not that ye should then desire to bless, rather curse a little also. And should a great injustice befall you, then do quickly 5 small ones besides. Hideous to behold is he on whom injustice presseth alone. Did ye ever know this? Shared injustice is half justice. He who can bear it shall take the injustice upon himself. A small revenge is humaner than no revenge at all. And if the punishment be not also a right and an honor to the transgressor, I do not like your punishing. Nobler is it to own oneself in the wrong than to establish one's right, especially if one be in the right. Only one must be rich enough to do so. I do not like your cold justice. Out of the eye of your judges there always glanceth the executioner, and his cold steel. Tell me, where find we justice, which is love with seeing eyes? Devise me, then, the love which not only beareth all punishment, but also all guilt. Devise me, then, the justice which acquitteth everyone except the judge. And would ye hear this likewise? To him who seeketh to be just from the heart, even the lie become philanthropy. But how could I be just from the heart? How can I give everyone his own? Let this be enough for me. I give unto everyone mine own. Finally, my brethren, guard against doing wrong to any anchorite. How could an anchorite forget? How could he requite? Like a deep well is an anchorite. Easy it is to throw in a stone. If it should sink to the bottom, however, tell me, who will bring it out again? Guard against injuring the anchorite. If ye have done so, however, well then, kill him also. Thus spake Zarathustra. So he was saying a couple chapters previously about when you're alone, when you're this lonesome person, it's easy to want to give out your hand to anyone because you're alone, and it's just like any bit of kindness that someone would offer you, you're quick to accept it. You're quick to reach out your hand. He's saying, don't offer your hand, but instead a paw. And may your paw be clawed, because sometimes you would have to defend yourself, and don't just accept everything they offer. And that if they're offering injustice, do them one back, Let your paw bear its claws and be able to strike back. Maybe that's what he means by do it 5 small injustices in return. 5 fingers, 5 claws, something like that. Some weird parable there, it seems like. But that he also made the point of he did not like the normal justice that happens, because when you go to their courts and such, it's usually justice was made by killing or executing the guilty. You're the guilty one. Off with their heads. How is that justice? How can you discuss justice when your eye is always on that executioner? So things are going to go out of proportion. You know what I mean? You're not giving it the right level of justice that it deserves. And this was just going through details of what he considers to be the right way to deliver that justice. All right. 20. Child and marriage. I have a question for thee alone, my brother. Like a sounding lead, cast I this question unto thy soul, that I may know its depth. Thou art young, and dearest child, and marriage. But I ask thee, art thou a man entitled to desire a child? Art thou the victorious one, the self-conqueror, the ruler of thy passions, the master of thy virtues? Thus do I ask thee. Or doth the animal speak in thy wish, and necessity, or isolation, or discord in thee? I would have thy victory and freedom long for a child. Living monuments shalt thou build to thy victory and emancipation. Beyond thyself shalt thou build, but first of all must thou be built thyself, rectangular in body and soul. Not only onward shalt thou propagate thyself, but upward. For that purpose may the garden of marriage help thee. A higher body shalt thou create, a first movement, a spontaneously rolling wheel, a creating one shalt thou create. Marriage, so call I the will of the twain to create the one that is more than those who created it, the reverence for one another, as those exercising such a will, call I marriage. Let this be the significance and the truth of thy marriage, but that which the many too many call marriage, those superfluous ones, shall I call it? The poverty of the soul in the twain. The filth of the soul in the twain. The pitiable self-complacency in the twain. Marriage, they call it all. And they say their marriages are made in heaven. Well, I do not like it. That heaven of the superfluous. No, I do not like them. Those animals tangled in the heavenly toils. Far from me also be the God, who limpeth thither to bless what he hath not matched. Laugh not at such marriages. What child hath not had reason to weep over its parents? Worthy did this man seem, and ripe for the meaning of the earth, but when I saw his wife, the earth seemed to me a home for madcaps. Yea, I would that the earth shook with convulsions when a saint and a goose mate with one another. This one went forth in quest of truth as a hero, and at last got for himself a small decked-up lie. His marriage he calleth it. That one is reserved in intercourse, and chose choicely. But one time he spoilt his company for all time. His marriage he calleth it. Another sought a handmaid with the virtues of an angel. All at once he became the handmaid of a woman. And now would he need also to become an angel? Careful, have I found all buyers, and all of them have astute eyes, but even the astutest of them buyeth his wife in a sack. Many short follies, that is called love by you, and your marriage putteth an end to many short follies, with one long stupidity. Your love to woman, and woman's love to man, would that it were sympathy for suffering and veiled deities, but generally two animals alight on one another. But even your best love is only an enraptured simile and a painful ardor. It is a torch to light you to loftier paths. Beyond yourselves shall ye love some day. Then learn first of all to love, and on that account ye had to drink the bitter cup of your love. Bitterness is in the cup even of the best love. Thus doth it cause longing for the Superman. Thus doth it cause thirst in thee, the creating one. Thirst in the creating one, arrow and longing for the Superman. Tell me, my brother, is this thy will to marriage? Holy call I such a will, and such a marriage. Thus spake Zarathustra. So it's kind of just saying quite plainly that if your marriage is just out of a lust or something, you haven't gone through this process yet of having gone through the ashes to rebuild and remake yourself into something better than yourself. How great of a parent are you going to be? Straight up. Like, if you haven't grown up yourself, if you're just a child that can mate, then what future is there for that child? It's just, he's just being straight up about it. And that if you wish to strive to build this world for Superman, you must first strive within yourself and find a mate who also strives for that. In there, that would create this marriage that could build towards a world for the Superman. Makes sense. It's like a practical thing that a person could do to build a world into the Superman is build yourself first. Find a mate that will build also with you. Don't be the one who is great, but then, what did you say? It called her a goose or some such. When a saint and a goose mate with one another, being like the guy is great, but she's just a goose. She's not a swan. I guess that's what they mean by goose. It's not just being a swan, but somebody who, instead of being a goose, is also a saint, right? Two saints is, I guess, what he's trying to say here. He uses a lot of strange words. I'm not familiar with a lot of idioms. I'm just going to throw that out there. Even the idioms of my own culture, I just grew up without them, and I find them unusual. So when I hear idioms of any culture, I'm like, why do people still speak in these old ways? I find them strange. I find them sometimes out of place. It's like an old meme. You're going to hang out with friends, and somebody decides like they're going to Rickroll you, and it's like, yeah, that was funny when I was like in grade school, but come on. Really? This is what you got for sharing knowledge? This is how you speak to one another through just these silly memes? I should point out when I'm saying memes, I mean the joke memes that we share with each other, like on Reddit and social media, not the memes of what the word actually means, which is in sharing information. What's a meme of information? E equals MC squared. Okay, we can just say that. Just by looking at it, you know what the equation means, and you understand the depth of what they're trying to say. Energy equals whatever. So we're talking about like energy there, and it's just a meme that we're just sharing it in a short way because we're talking about something bigger. But yeah, idioms. I don't know idioms, so in some ways, I think a lot of the text that is being shared here is sharing idioms because he's trying to express a lot with just a few short words. However, yeah, because I'm not familiar with idioms of this culture or that culture or whatever culture Zarathustra came from, I'm sometimes lost by why is he calling a woman a goose? But I kind of get the gist of it, and that's what he's meaning, that if we're creating a world for supermen, then this is how we should strive in the sake of marriage. I like that this follows the previous chapter about if we can all boil things down to if a woman is just about wanting to have a child, then if you're playing around with that kind of thing, then what do you think is going to become the result of it? Kind of the small truth, if you're going to go, then go with the whip, because the whip being you use it as the driving force to go somewhere with it, the intent of it, to give it a purpose. And if your purpose is just to play around, well, you're going to drink that bitter cup, the consequence of that sort of marriage that was like, oops, accident, Or do you instead decide, no, I'm going to separate from that. I'm going to build myself and then come back to this. And with that whip, drive for a meaningful marriage, for meaningful children. Okay. Chapter 21. Ooh, we might finish this chapter, this volume today. Voluntary death. Many die too late, and some die too early. Yet strange soundeth the precept. Die at the right time. Die at the right time, so teacheth Zarathustra. I need a drink. Sorry for the noise. Die at the right time, so teacheth the Zarathustra. To be sure, he who never liveth at the right time, how could he ever die at the right time? Would that he might never be born. Thus do I advise the superfluous ones, but even the superfluous ones make such ado about their death, and even the hollowest nut wanteth to be cracked. Everyone regardeth dying as a great matter, but as yet death is not a festival. Not yet have people learned to inaugurate the finest festivals. The consummating death I show unto you, which becometh a stimulus and promise to the living. His death dieth the consummating one triumphantly, surrounded by hoping and promising ones. Thus should one learn to die, and there should be no festival at which such a dying one doth not consecrate the oaths of the living. Thus, to die is best. The next best, however, is to die in battle and sacrifice a great soul. But to the fighter, equally hateful as to the victor, is your grinning death, which stealeth nigh like a thief, and yet cometh as master. My death praise I unto you, the voluntary death, which cometh to me, because I want it. And when shall I want it? He that hath a goal and an heir wanteth death at the right time for the goal and the heir. And out of reverence for the goal and the heir, he will hang up no more withered wreaths in the sanctuary of life. Verily, not the rope makers will I resemble. They lengthen out their cord, and thereby go ever backwards. Many a one also waxeth too old for his truths and triumphs. A toothless mouth hath no longer the right to every truth, and whoever wanteth to have fame must take leave of honor betimes, and practice the difficult art of going at the right time. One must discontinue being feasted upon when one tasteth best. That is known by those who want to be long loved, Sour apples are there, no doubt. Those lot is to wait until the last day of autumn, and at the same time they become ripe, yellow, and shriveled. In some ageth the heart first, and in others the spirit, and some are hoary in youth, but the late young keep long young. Too many men, life is a failure. A poison worm gnaweth at their heart. Then let them see to it that their dying is all the more a success. Many never become sweet. They rot, even in the summer. It is cowardice that holdeth them fast to their branches. Far too many live, and far too long hang they on their branches. Would that a storm came and shook all this rottenness and worm-eatenness from the tree. Would that there came preachers of speedy death. Those would be the appropriate storms and agitators of the trees of life, but I hear only slow death preached, and patience with all that is earthly. Ah, ye preach patience with what is earthly? This earthly is it that hath too much patience with you, ye blasphemers. Verily, too early died that Hebrew whom the preachers of slow death honor, and too many hath it proved a calamity that he died too early. And yet he had known only tears, and the melancholy of the Hebrews, together with the hatred of the good and just. The Hebrew Jesus, I don't know, was he seized with the longing for death. Had he but remaineth in the wilderness, far from the good and just, then perhaps would he have learned to live, and love the earth, and laughter too. Believe it, my brethren, he died too early. He himself would have disavowed his doctrine. Had he attained to my age, noble enough was he to disavow. But he was still immature. Immaturely loved the youth, and immaturely also hateth he man and earth. Confined and awkward are still his soul and the wings of his spirit. But in man there is more of the child than in the youth, and less of melancholy. Better understandeth he about life and death. Free for death, and free in death, a holy naysayer, when there is no longer time for yea. Thus understandeth he about death and life. That your dying may not be a reproach to man and the earth, my friends, that do I solicit from the honey of your soul. In your dying shall your spirit and your virtue still shine like an evening afterglow around the earth. Otherwise, your dying been unsatisfactory. Thus will I die myself, that ye, friends, may love the earth more for my sake. And earth will I again become, to have rest in her that bore me. Verily, a goal had Zarathustra. He threw his ball. Now be ye, friends, the heirs of my goal. To you threw I the golden ball. Best of all, do I see you, my friends, throw the golden ball. And so tarry I still a little while on the earth. Pardon me for it. Thus spake Zarathustra. I feel like he's picking out at specific people, perhaps, that he had known. Perhaps he lived in a culture where there were lots of people about. There were elders and such. And a lot of these elders were a pain to deal with. That at some point, those elders had sour apples. That's the word. That's what he called them. And he so wished that these people were just preached death, and that when you're becoming sour, well, maybe you should have died before now. And if those sour people were all dead and not existing, how much different the world would be without all those sour people about. And okay, that's fine. That's Zarathustra's solution to that in case where they don't have a voice. Could be another solution. But he was saying he was living his life with purpose to a point, and that before he soured, before, how does that saying go? Careful thee who slay monsters, for one day a monster they will become. Something similar to that, right? Where if you're a hero and you're saving people, that's great, but at some point, something about your character is going to begin to fail. And at that point, you're going to become the monster. Um, be it for some greed of like, no, I must be the best. And like your involvement makes things for the worst rather than you being the hero and making things better. And better it would have been if that hero had perhaps gone to war and died before he came back and become the monster that they were known for. And that's in some way what Zarathustra is saying there. I don't know if I agree with him that they should just be dead, because there's still something worth experiencing in life. But, however, no longer letting them have the voice, which I guess pollutes the society around them. But Zarathustra believes, he also mentioned Jesus and the biblical Hebrew character, and that saying that he died too soon, and that he was immature, and if he had known better, he could have grown to be as old as Zarathustra and perhaps taught better. But Zarathustra says he calls it a golden ball. I guess it being this ball of knowledge that he's passing to others, and that he is happy to see others bear that golden ball with that knowledge, that they shall then pass it down to, I guess, build this Superman, this next evolution of culture, of humanity that he dreams in. But he's not dying yet. He'll still be around for a while. There's more. I do wish to continue, because we're so close to the end, but this is the longing. We don't have any reason to rush. There will be other days. Our fire has gone out. But it did pass a good considerable bit of time. We've almost gone through a whole other day, I think. I'll leave the shade to his thoughts. Let's find him a book to read of his own. Let him continue to read the Iliad. And tomorrow, should go on some adventure. I think I know exactly the adventure to go on. Should be a fun one. Well, to me, they're all fun. It should be, I guess I'll call it a meaningful one. Impactful. We'll talk about the essence of the longing, that the longing is a dark game. And even though we're idling our time reading books and stuff, things to pass our time and give us something to do, the game itself is all about this sense of longing for something else. And the world map, it's hard to say world, but it represents a journey of something inside, the internal. That part that we had read today about ashes and making something else out of the ashes. And I guess the darkness that you would have to find within yourselves. So for our shade, he has such trials as well. And that's the adventure we'll go on tomorrow.